Thank you so very much for having me, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here now for the second time on your show.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us again. Last time again, you showed us some things that Databricks could do on AI or using like SQL and AI. Today, I think we're using Genie and kind of be going through that. And you've set up some workbooks already, but love to kind of see what you found out thus far, what's working, what's not, and kind of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so fun thing, AI BI Genie was announced back at DICE like 2 weeks ago. And it was very fun, big splash. I've known about it for a handful of months right now. So I was like, yes, it's finally public. The way that we should think about Genie is it's meant to do the things that a dashboard perhaps wouldn't be able to do as well or as fast. And instead, it's meant to be similar to what an intern would do at a company. Intern comes in, perhaps they have the technical chops, but they don't necessarily have the business knowledge that well or that is that good. So the nice thing about Genie is you're giving it prompts and then it's learning as to what you want it to do and what you don't want it to do, which helps over time give reliable answers to the questions that you have.
Yeah. I think that's kind of funny that we still struggle to the business context is still the problem. It sounds like we still just we have all the technical aspect, but we're always trying to figure out how to fill the gap of business context.
Well, and I will add a note to that is it is connected to all your comments and everything else that you're leveraging within the Unity catalog.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not completely starting brand new. It's not you copying your data and just throwing it over to ChatGPT or something like that. That's not what it is. This is aware of all the metadata surrounding really your data infrastructure. So that is very nice. But in the same way that if you're new to a role, someone might ask a question from you, you might present the information in a way that you think makes sense to you. And then that person's going to be like, no, I want my numbers formatted in a different way. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like the back and forth that you have with Genie. But the nice thing is, once it knows what you like, you can actually say, hey, this is exactly when I ask this kind of question, this is how I want you to show the data to me. And you can learn with that. Not flawlessly, but a lot of times it gets it right.
Yes, that's that makes me think like the fact that it's connected to the catalog reminds me. I just filmed a video yesterday where I was kind of going through Facebook's infrastructure, I guess Meta's now, and they referenced iData, which is their catalog internally that they've built. And one of the things obviously they reference is like, okay, it's when you search, it's very aware of, again, comments and things of that nature. The thing I didn't know is it's also connected to Workplace, which Facebook's discontinuing, but it was essentially the internal kind of Slack, a little bit more, but kind of Slack. And then also tasks. So it would also use like how often tables were referenced, where they were referenced, as well as like how often they're commented on in workplaces, like ways to give more information. So I imagine like that almost be the next step for Unity catalog is to get like connected with everything. So it really has a good idea how data is being used.
Yeah, well, and the nice thing too is I think you're addressing the concept of like popularity of a source, and that is one of the things that the Unity catalog does support. Like especially if you're using like the search option, it kind of knows the popularity of a field, of a table, how often is this query, is this table being hit. Now, I will give one distinction though when it comes to Genie. It is meant to be more like a curated place for you to go to. And when I say that is, hey, you know what? In fact, let's actually maybe start doing it. So
yeah, let's do it. Let's dive in.
So let's create a new. You're going to call a Genie space. And let's do video with Dan. Sales related. So for this example, I'm going to connect the warehouse that I want to assign for to be used with the Genie space. I'm going to connect right here. And I'm going to say which tables I want this Genie space to be aware of. For the sake of this video, I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm just going to have my table here.
I'm curious then, do you have to be aware of what tables you need to use?
Correct. Yeah, because, well, there's two sides to it. If you are the person, say like the expert analysts, you would want to be aware of the tables where you would normally find the information, because the goal for this is that you are going to prepare this room for those that are less technical, but you're still kind of guiding it a little bit by saying, hey, whenever you have a sales related question, this is the Genie space that you go to. So you say, these are the relevant tables for the types of questions that I know you would ask in this environment.
Yeah.
So,
So there still needs to be some level, it sounds like, of curation even from the start then.
Correct. Yes, because you have to, with LLMs, we know that there's still hallucinations and all that. This is a way of decreasing those hallucinations. You're not exposing all of your data, but just the relevant data that Joel might be interested in. It also helps with permissioning too. Just think about it this way. Someone has access to the Genie space. You don't want them to have perhaps the finance level detail for sales, but you want them just like the regular sales tables that might have purely revenue, for example. So it allows you to easily curate that instead of understanding, these are all the permissionings for this table.
Well, that makes me ask, then the question is, and sorry, just keep asking.
No, you're
more
good.
Curious, because to me, my brain would tell me that I would hope that Genie would know, based on who the user is, what permissions they have access to. And if they can't run a query, or if this Genie has access to a table that maybe the end user shouldn't have access to, I would hope that it would just say like, hey, I can't run this query for you because you don't have access, right? It doesn't run it without that knowledge.
I would hope so too. And
oh, good. You would also hope.
I'm not aware. I do not know how it handles that level of permissioning when the underlying resource. But then again, you could, just to take a step back, maybe you don't give regular access to a table to a user because maybe you're afraid that they might not understand the data, or they just don't need to. So for that purposes, you don't have it so that they even know of that table's existence. But maybe you're okay with them asking questions or querying that table through Genie to have more of that guided experience so they can solve their business problems in the similar way that you might not give someone access to all of the tables, but within the context of a dashboard, you would want to give them access to that data.
Okay. Well, I don't want to hold you too long, so I'll let you.
Yeah, no, you're all good.
Lots of questions.
Those are good questions, and this is still a public preview thing. So still public preview. I'm sure that some of the people from Databricks will be listening and watching this video, and they're gonna likely take some notes as to some other angles that they need to cover if they haven't covered them. So I selected just one table, like I said, but I could set some starter questions that we could potentially ask in this environment. We don't need to, but I'm going to just keep this one simple. I want to say sales by state since 2022. I have to add that. So we're going to go ahead and save. And now our Genie space has been created. If your warehouse was idle, you want to turn it on.
Yeah.
And before we dive into what everyone really wants to do, which is ask questions, let's do a quick show through some of the pieces here. For example, in instructions, on the general instruction side, I can give it general system prompts that I would want it to consider or evaluate when it's giving its output. I will say, in my experience, half the time it wants to listen to those, half the time it doesn't.
Okay.
And I believe it's likely because it's misunderstanding the data itself, because it is not aware of the contents of your data. It's purely metadata from the tables itself and the schemas and whatnot. So something to be aware of. So I have created some general instructions that I kind of wanted to just include in here. Hey, try to format dollars the right way, this way, format percentages this way, and whatnot. I'm going to go ahead and save that.
Yes.
On top of that, we'll dive a little bit into instructions a little bit later, but I'm going to just go ahead and start off by adding a simple instruction here. An instruction is basically a SQL-based guidance as to how it should answer certain types of questions. So some people might be familiar with the concept of rate volume mix, which is fairly popular in finance. Sometimes I hear it called profit volume mix.
Can you just maybe just a little bit quick definition, like, just because I'm sure there are some people who haven't.
Yeah.
So what is rate volume mix?
So one of the things that rate volume mix can help you answer or understand, for example, is month over month, what was the impact of each category on my bottom line when describing change? For example, let's say I had $1,000 more in sales in the coffee category from the first month to the second month. Great. Was it because I raised my prices? Was it because I had more volume in sales? Or could it be something that we can attribute as a combination of both? And it's a fancy formula. There's a few different versions of the formula written by people that are much smarter than me. I took the formula online and I put it on ChatGPT so I can just more easily display it here. So, but it's, in my experience in finance, it was very helpful to understand why are our numbers changing at a very, very high level. And then obviously you can dive deeper into understanding, oh yes, it's because the cost of this repairs are a lot higher than they used to be. So I'm going to go ahead and add a sample example query. I'm going to paste that. I'm going to say, what is our... Going to go ahead and save it. And before I dive into the actual chat pieces, I'm going to go ahead and, you see the connection to our data here. Monitoring, you would be able to see all of the different prompts that we have given it, all the different conversations that we have given it. And it's very nice because as we're going through the different chat conversations, you can actually say, hey, this was a good answer, this was not a good answer. And we'll dive a little bit more into that. Last but not least, here's your settings, right? So let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little new chat, and we can ask something as simple as explain this data set, which is, it's going to look at the metadata connected to the Unity catalog for that table. So pretty straightforward. But then I'm actually going to do another one. And let's say, I'm just going to go ahead and ask it based on this suggested question that we had, sales by state since 2022. So it explains what it believes it's trying to do. And this right here would basically give you the answer. Now I do have here on my on a little tab, I'm going to quickly toggle over because I remember how many states I have here. I'm going to go ahead and we look through this, and yep, I have 3 different states. So that's one. That's very good. Now let's actually look at the generated code, which is actually the right thing to do in this case. Show generated code. And this looks to be a very straightforward, good SQL code right here. Which is nice. Now, before we get excited, like, hey, it got it right, it did get some things wrong. If you notice here, total revenue, look at all these decimals right here. If you remember correctly on my instructions, I have all dollar-related items should be rounded to 1 decimal place. Now, it could potentially not understand that that is a dollar, but given the metadata that's in it, it should understand that it is dollars or related to sales or currency. So that's a flaw, but in theory, that should not be a problem, right? I'm doing this, and you know what? I want to say round all numbers to 1 decimal place, and then let's say include profit and cost. Let's see how it works for that. So interesting enough here, it kind of did its own little thing. It got this decimal places right, but it actually didn't include the decimal spot here.
Yeah, no.
As well as, let's take a look at what other things kind of went wrong here. So this seems to be right.
Oh, no, but it rounded, but it was so close to 1 anyways, I think is what happened.
Yeah. So, and this is dummy data, by the way. So I'm not surprised that the numbers are all the same because this is just the dummy generated data. So as you can see here, it was already like that. So, but yeah, so it got it wrong in there. So I would then give it like all numbers should have 1 decimal place. Oh, so this is one of those situations where it's, hey, it's not getting it right. But let's assume that, that it did get it right. Let's just say I'm happy with this results right here. I was able to go ahead and do add as instruction. And then I could go over here to instructions, and I will find this one right here, which they're not naming it the right way right now. So hopefully in the future, they'll actually change this. So it's actually showing the question that you originally asked. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm just going to say, what are our sales? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Save that. And I'm going to go ahead and now do a new chat. I'm going to go ahead and ask that question again. What are our sales? And in theory, it should give about the same response that we had before, like the final response that we had.
I would say that these questions are still, to me, very it just reminds me of when I saw some of the first NLP to SQL or like, natural language to SQL examples, which is generally show me like, whatever, average sales or total sales by region or something. And it remains there.
Yes.
Have you pushed it beyond that? Because I think that's the thing. It's like, this is one layer, but it's always like, how do we really get it to that next step?
I think a good example could be potentially that rate volume mix. And that, again, this is a dummy scenario that I've kind of created kind of last second, but let's go ahead and do a new chat. Okay.
Yeah.
I remember I'm not a technical person, but maybe I understand finance well.
Yeah.
I say, I want to look at our rate volume mix. Let's see if it picks up the other instructions that we had set for it to actually pull this up.
Oh, I think I just realized do you have 3,000 some days of free trial?
This is through the Sunny Data account. So this is through the Sunny Data account. So we got that. Okay. So notice how I asked this question. I didn't even word it exactly as the instructions that we had set up for it, but it actually ran that rate volume mix query the way that I asked it to run it. I asked for the rate volume mix. It gave me that. I could evaluate the query, obviously. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make a substitution. Here I have it by category. So let's do, I want it by product instead of category. So you see this, in this case, it did a good job actually substituting category and instead focusing on the product, which I think it's a little bit more complex, I think, than kind of what you were saying in that situation. But, at the end of the day, it's still a language interface connected to your data. And right now we're looking at a very brand new Genie space. Everyone's perception is, oh, it's a black box, you just connect it to your data and go ahead and it's going to give you all the right answers. No, realistically, this is it being connected to your data, and having this feature is 80% of the process. The other 20% is you curating this Genie spaces so that the model understands the different types of business questions that someone might ask that might not be appropriately answered by a dashboard. And this helps facilitate that. Again, we're talking right now going from 0 to 60 right now. Realistically, I'm going to set up this Genie space for my CFO. I'm going to test it through a lot of the different questions that I know my CFO might ask it. All the questions that the CFO asks from me that the dashboard doesn't necessarily clearly put for them. And I can get it all in one place, curated so that in a very simple, straightforward way without having to ask me and go back and forth.
Yeah.
They can kind of help themselves. This is the vision. But again, we're going from a very cold start here.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, I'm always going to poke holes, especially in this. I think I've always had mixed feelings about text to SQL. I imagine companies like Databricks or Snowflake have kind of an advantage there because they have all the prior queries ran against them, that they can essentially run and test against.
So don't quote me on this, but if you're referring to other users' queries, I don't believe that Databricks uses it for training.
Yeah, no, I imagine, they've got to be very careful there, but
yeah,
especially in terms of like your own data set, right? Like if you could train your own SQL queries, that would be
and this is kind of what you're doing, right? Because you're creating, let's say finance and sales both like looking at the same type of numbers.
Yeah.
But how they see those numbers is very different. In a dashboard environment, you might have to create, different views for the same type of information. Within Genie, for the type of information that they're asking for, you are taking away some of that complexity by saying, hey, well, we have to adjust this one for this person, this one for this person. You're creating this room so that anyone that's finance related, they'll have the type of question, the type of answer that they're looking for in the way that they like their information displayed here, and is going to learn from that person's style, right? Or that Genie style. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense.
So yeah, so going to this example here real quick. So again, we successfully changed it from looking at category to looking at the product. Then I can also say something else like, and this is a good example, I just want to look at the data for 2024. Yeah, let's go with that.
Suddenly I just thought of like the common question you get from, someone either on sales or accounting.
Yeah, and yes, that's exactly what this. So again, this is an intern that you'll ask the questions that again normally would not fit on a dashboard, or that might be too big of a pain for you to actually have to go to a dashboard, filter it down, and whatnot. And you ask this question every so often, and maybe you need to export it to CSV or Excel, whatever it is. This is perfect for that again, but don't treat it like a black box, because if you're looking for a pure black box, then just go ahead and use the Databricks AI assistant, because guess what? That's connected to all of your Unity catalog metadata. So that means you're going to be technical enough that you can be entrusted with that power. But if you're not technical enough to be entrusted with that power of just letting the LLM do whatever it wants to do, this is kind of like that good bridge between LLM freedom and business user freedom.
Yeah. No, what I was going to ask is, for anyone who works in data, half the time it feels like you'll give a report to a CEO or CFO or director, and the response is, these numbers look wrong.
Yep.
No context. So I'm curious if so with the LLM, right? Like, it's almost like if you ever ask ChatGPT, like, hey, this is wrong. And suddenly it's like, oh, yes, of course it's wrong. And then it tries giving you a different answer. So I'm curious if it would hallucinate, or write a different query, even if it was right. Like, let's imagine it is right, but because someone's like, I think it's wrong, what I imagine someone's going to do, like if they do ask that question, what would the LLM do, or what would, the Genie do essentially? Would it try fixing it, but make it worse, right? Like, especially if it was right in the first place.
So first off, I think it basically, if it doesn't think it knows how to answer the question well enough, it errs on the side of just saying, hey, this can't be done.
Yeah.
So, which is, I think, a good safeguard. In terms of hallucinations, that's all that, that is always going to be possible. But you know what? Let's try this out. Now, I'm pretty confident that this data here is good, but let's actually go ahead and test that out. Why not? This data is wrong. Angry face. Let's see what it does.
And it's about as curt as often a C-suite person would say.
Yes, this data is
wrong. And you're like, what do you mean?
Okay, this I think is good. Let's specify the expected outcome or any discrepancy you've noticed. They'll help you address your concern. It seems like a polite, fairly good answer to me.
But they're not going to know why. They're going to be like, or maybe they will. Maybe they'll specifically know that one of these numbers is off. But
And I think it's not like the other LLMs that are going to keep on hallucinating, though. I think it does stop and okay, tell me why are you thinking this is wrong? Because remember, it is not aware of the actual values of your data. It does not know them. And my guess is that they do that for privacy reasons.
Yeah.
I wish that they were aware of the values, because, sometimes that would help a lot with different things, but right now it's not. And if I know something about Databricks, is that they err on the side of data privacy versus not erring on the side of data privacy, which for businesses, that's a good thing. And the good thing is as this technology matures and how they're doing it, I think their approach is the right way. Again, their approach is LLMs are not good enough to be trusted as a black box for giving you results. If your business depends on that, it's going to be a rough one, right? At the end of the day, imagine this scenario. You're a CFO. You're about to submit some very important tax documents, right? And you have to pull some data out. Are you going to just blindly trust an LLM, just that they're going to give you the right data and everything looks good? No. You're probably going to want something that's more like this, that tries to eliminate some of that, again, that black box magic, while giving you a little taste of it, and at the same time tries to eliminate your need from having to go to that intern, to that analyst every single time. Or perhaps you are that analyst and you have something so well done within Genie that this is your go-to source for whenever your boss asks you that question, because you have a room dedicated to the types of questions your boss asks. And instead of you having to try to remember, what's this query that I always run from my boss or something, you have a place with those answers. Yeah. Someone comes in new to the business and your boss is asking them that question, you can show them, hey, here's the repertoire, here's the Genie space that we have, that we ask a lot of the commonly asked questions. Of course, is it going to be always right? Unless it's like one of those more certified type answers that it gives, then probably not, but it's going to be directionally, it's going to save you time.
Yeah.
So, I didn't get paid by Databricks to say that. I'm just calling it for a fact. So, beyond the hype, honestly, whenever this was announced and as people were talking about it and working on it, I see the long-term value on this. Right now, is it ready for production? No, I've chatted a little bit with some of the product managers from Databricks, and I've given them a lot of feedback, and they're listening, and they are working on making this better. And really, the best way that they're going to get better with this is by taking the feedback from people like me, from people like you, and looking at these videos to really make the product better. And honestly, again, not a block for Databricks, but it's one of the things that I appreciate about them, that if something is not working well, they will try to make it better. So
yeah, cool. Well, I don't want to keep you too long on not showing stuff. So if you had other things, feel free to...
No, you're good. That was a good conversation. Hopefully it made sense what I was saying. Okay, so this data is wrong. You know what? For the sake of this, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So, we filter by the year. Okay, so let's see how the code looks. Again, you wouldn't necessarily have your end users looking at the code, but you might look at it. So it's being filtered. So we have that. So this seems good. So it is actually a flaw. There's a flaw here because this filter is being passed on so early, and the results need the previous results for it to calculate properly. This filter is being passed on too early. So I'm going to say the year filter should be passed at the end, not at the beginning. Because in theory, there should be 1 month 1 here because we're looking at 2024. Yep, there you go. So now it's right here. And again, in this case, a lot of business users might be able to have that very basic understanding too, to say, hey, this data doesn't look right. That what I just did was the equivalent of me saying, hey, this data doesn't look right. Maybe I think a better question would have been like, without saying, hey, put this at the very end, but a better test would have been like, hey, this data doesn't look right. The first month is missing. Yeah. Maybe that would have been a better thing too.
That would have been more accurate to a non-technical user.
Yeah. So, missed opportunity to test there, but that'll be a fun test. Last but not least, we can say we like the concept of filtering by a specific year. And this type of instructions that, hey, sometimes there's scenarios where I want to be looking at a specific year. I want Genie to understand that concept very well, so that in the future, it doesn't put that filter at the beginning, but it puts it at the end. Because sometimes I may want to look at year 2023. So then let's go ahead and go to add as instruction. Go to this. And I'm going to say, need the rate mix by a specific year. So now let's try that and let's see what happens. What is the rate from here for 2023? So if you remember previously we filtered by 2024. Oh, look at this right here. So this is learning from all of the different conversations right here. So, and based on the prompts, now it's saying, well, do you want this by the category, product, or everything? So it has been learning the types of questions that we've been given and recording, because now it knows, hey, sometimes you pass this by category. In fact, your default question is by category, but you also store instructions to save this by product. Now it's learned from multiple SQL queries. Now it's understanding that sometimes you ask by product, sometimes you ask by category. Yeah. Let's say by category. Beautiful. So you see this right here. So it got that first month, which is exactly what we needed it to do. We told it to do it by category, got the category right, and it filtered that 2023. And now let's see if it actually put that year filter at the very end. So it did not make that same mistake that it did the first time. If you remember when I said, hey, no, I want this actually to be at the end because we saved instructions for it. And now it knows, hey, it filtered at the end. But now let's have some additional fun with this. So let's say I only want to look at coffee. And I will call out, again, I have those general instructions. Now, those general instructions might be getting trumped by the SQL that I have written where I didn't have this rules in there. So it is very possible that that's maybe why the SQL specific instructions are trumping those general instructions, which makes sense. Okay, so we got coffee, but we're going to likely notice a flaw, or let's see if actually did it the right way. So this is what I would consider the flaw based on my understanding of rate volume mix. It applied that coffee filter at the beginning, but I still want to see coffee within the context of everything. So what would be a business way of saying that instead of saying, hey, I want this at the end?
So just to clarify, you're trying to say like you want to compare it to coffee, or?
So because we're doing the filter here at the very beginning, it means it's only doing the rate volume mix comparison between the context of coffee. I wanted to take all of the results for everything and then just narrow down to looking at coffee within the context of understanding the impact of the numbers across the different categories.
I think what's hard here is like you have to then understand the data to put this question in to understand
exactly.
I think, again, the way that a non-technical person might say this is, either the data looks off, maybe a specific number looks off, right? Like that would be, maybe it's like, oh, hey, I know that the number for whatever January should be whatever the number is. And so it's going to be very limiting. And otherwise, I have to like abstractly think, this is what the data set looks like. Based on that, I know that, maybe coffee is the only thing being included here or something.
So, and again, I'm doing a very specific analysis based on my understanding of this too. So it's a little like, I know the nuances of it, but let's say, is this doing all calculations first and then filtering?
Okay. But see, I still think you're assuming that they understand how the underlying query runs.
And this is realistically where it's like that gray area, right? So
I think this is the other hard part about running. I know you said you don't run it like a black box, but like that is how people are going to, in some cases, run it. And so it's hard to like separate not knowing what something runs as and knowing what it runs at, like what it's running. So I think that's always another gap in a lot of these like kind of question to SQL kind of approaches.
And again, this is where I'll say this again. You don't just throw the black box at your user, but you actually have that person who is familiar with the data curate this Genie spaces. And I think that would be the biggest takeaway. It's not a black box. These are meant to be curated first. So the LLM is training on your feedback and your input, and hence why we had questions such as this one right here, where it's saying, hey, I know your users have queried before category and product, or just want anything and everything. So in a nutshell, I think this is, this shows a lot of it. You can obviously do some visualizations and charts and whatnot, but those are things are still a little bit rough around the edges, and maybe with this one might not be a good example, but let's go to this one here. Let's, for the sake of testing, let's do a pie chart. So everyone knows that I love pie charts.
You love pie charts. You do. You have a whole website about it.
Yes. There you go. So I at least did that.
And that's a donut chart.
Yes. Yeah, it's always like, is it a donut? Is it a pie?
I wonder if it just defaults to donut or if it just doesn't know this. Oh no, the labels are all one corner.
So I intentionally added the label because I know they're still not working yet. That's still in the process, right?
All right, analyst jobs are still safe. You guys can.
Analyst jobs are still safe. But again, if it was me, if I was an analyst, the way that I would consider this is if I spend the time building this out, the similar way that you might build out a dashboard for those answers that again, dashboards would be overkill. I believe this is going to take you less time to build out, and it's going to give you that flexibility again of, hey, there's less head knowledge and more that you're putting that knowledge into the Genie space, which I think there's so many queries that I have saved in a notebook somewhere for questions that people ask me or have saved as queries within Databricks. So, for me, this is nice if there's questions around certain topics that get asked often.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for your time. This was great. It was really cool to see kind of what it can do, what it can't do, and also just think about all the ways that I can imagine end users would use it and possibly cause some chaos, but also, it's still early. We're just finally now seeing Waymo, I don't know, open up sort of for general availability in San Francisco. So, it took 8 years?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have a similar process here. I don't know.
Yeah. And again, it's still earlier on, but I think the vision is there. And I think the ability to execute is there. You could argue that a well-instructed Genie space could likely do a lot better than how these examples were taking place today.
Yeah.
So I want to be cautious to say that they're necessarily production ready. But, this is still a public preview. So they're still learning. They're still relabeling certain things to like, okay, no, this is a truer way of representing this, and it's good. Progress is good, and hopefully people give give good feedback on it. I recently did a video online, and I showed up some of the issues that were happening. I reached out to the Databricks team, and they're like, "Oh yes, we're aware of those, and they're already on our list of things that we're going to be fixing." So they're on top of that.
Yeah, I really appreciate this, and I don't want to hold you too long, but thanks again.
Yeah, and thanks to Sunny Data for sponsoring my little spend here. So I'll send them the $20 bill. Thank you so very much for having me over, man.
Yeah, thank you.